Hello, welcome everyone. This is ISA Presents Trekking Through TV, the Past and Future of TV Writing with ISA and Roddenberry Entertainment. We are super excited to be partnering with Roddenberry today. This event has been a work in progress for a while, so thank you to everyone who helped put it together, everybody at Roddenberry, John and Scott and Michelle and Naren for being on this event today. I'm really excited. I know that it's going to be fantastic and a lot of fun. I'm going to use the opportunity because I know that we are also, we're on multi-platforms right now. You all are bringing us to a new level of our events, which is fun. So I'm going to use the opportunity to talk a little bit about the ISA for those of you who are tuning in via Roddenberry's side of things. You might not be as familiar with the ISA. So I'm going to give you a little snippet into our world, and then you can take it upon yourselves to go onto networkisa.org and take a look at everything else, do a deep dive into what we have to offer. So as a bird's eye view, we are first and foremost a group of passionate creatives working together to help elevate screenwriters to the next level in their career, whatever level they might be at. The way we do this is by offering a plethora of resources. So the ISA offers, we run our own contests, classes, events like this one, and also live events once we get back to doing that, consulting, pitch practice, feedback, script notes, just a bunch of stuff. And the goal is to help elevate both your craft of screenwriting and also the business end of screenwriting, because you need both to be successful. The first thing you can do if you take a look on our site is to set up a free profile page. So this is kind of like your online calling card. You get a private link and you can send it out to whomever you want. You get to list your screenplays, bio, resume, headshot, and your screenplays are protected. So you have full control over who can read your screenplay. You would post your synopsis and your logline, and if somebody's interested, they would reach out and you would say, okay or not. And then we have an upgraded membership, which is ISA Connect, which is $10 a month, 2 cups of coffee a month, to give your profile a little extra zhuzh. You can put some posters on, a pitch video, and your awards and your wins, your success stories, and then your profile is part of what we call the Writer's Showcase. And that is where all of the industry professionals that we have on the site, so agents, managers, producers, executives, they can find you. They can look for material and they can find you and connect. Also with that upgraded membership, you get a bunch of other things like discounts on all the resources that we list, free contest entries, and access to writing gigs. And so writing gigs we list, they're all over the board. There are some that are small indie productions that might not be paying, all the way up to large productions and television, because we go out and we have meetings with large production companies. We get their mandates and we post and we help them find content. So there's a wide range for everybody on the site. What else? Oh, did I talk about ISA Insider yet? We have a bunch of free content, podcasts like Mission Log that's co-hosted by John. Scott has a podcast on there. There's just a ton of podcasts, articles from both ISA and direct feeds from The Wrap and Movie Maker and Creative Screenwriting and others. And then videos that were called Pro Tips. So this video, the replay of this, will show up there next week or maybe sooner. We've been doing these online events for 2 years now, 2 to 3 times a month, and all that content is on there. Scott goes out and does red carpet events and interviews executives, and those are all on there. There's just a bunch. And then the ISA, we've been creating our own content. We have a news show. Scott has a show. Our director of education, Max, has a show. You could get lost for days and months on ISA Insider if you wanted to. Okay, and so I do want to let you all know we do have one more event coming up for June next Thursday, the 30th, with the Nickelodeon Writing Program. We are huge fans of Nickelodeon Writing Program. We've been working with them for many years. They open for submissions July 1st, and they're only open for the month of July. So all you need to do is go on their site and take a look at their accepted shows list and write a pilot for one of their accepted shows and submit it. It's free to submit. You have nothing to lose. And if you get selected, you get paid to write in a writer's room and be a part of this magnificent company. And then when you come out, you now have this fantastic resume builder, amazing contacts, and more than likely a job. It's not a given, but you're probably well on your way to getting into another writer's room. So please check that out. The event is going to be with a couple of the Nickelodeon executives and a couple of the alumni who went through the program and are now successful screenwriters. Okay. So I think that's it. No, one last thing. I need to say thank you to our sponsor, CineQuest. So we also have been working with CineQuest for many years. Their CineQuest Film and Creativity Festival, they give writers inspiration, opportunity, recognition. They run a fantastic film festival and screenwriting competition. And today they're giving us 3 free screenwriting entries. So this is how you enter to win. After this event, go and tweet out something that you learned or some fun fact, anything that you got garnered from this event, and tag at Network ISA. And then we're going to draw 3 winners at random, and we'll let you know early next week if you're a lucky winner. Okay, it is my incredible pleasure to introduce you to our moderators today, John Champion and Scott Markus. John he's been working with Roddenberry Entertainment, I think you just said, for 10 years on Mission Log. He is one of the co-hosts of that podcast. He also hosts and created another podcast called DVD Geeks, and has a multitude of other credits that I'm not going to list. Scott is the ISA's senior content manager. He vets all of the content, third-party content on the ISA site. So along with things that the ISA posts, we have all these other contests and classes and resources available, and Scott goes through them and makes sure they're trustworthy and legit, and you don't have to worry if you want to click and submit. He does a bunch of interviews, red carpet interviews. He does podcasts. He does all the editing for us. And he's a ghost hunter to top it all off. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Have a fantastic event, everybody, and a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly.
All right. John? So, yeah. So, well, with that, thank you, Molly. Absolutely. And it is my pleasure to welcome our very special guest. I will preface it by saying this. I have wanted to have this conversation for a long time. An hour is entirely too short. And I hope that we get to do this again or do it at a convention someday, because there are so many questions. We have invited a couple of representatives from Star Trek, writer, producers from a couple of different eras. We talk about the current era of Star Trek with the multitude of shows that are on Paramount Plus. And then if you wind the clock back not that long ago to the Berman era, so famously kicked off with Star Trek: The Next Generation in 1987 and going up through the end of Enterprise in 2005. So let me introduce our first guest. He is Naren Shankar, and this is such a great story for anybody out there in the ISA who wants to hear about climbing the ladder. Naren started as an intern on The Next Generation, had writing submissions that were taken, turned into shows, became a writer, a story editor, and then moved, of course he can tell us, moved from Next Gen to writing a bit for Voyager, writing a bit on DS9. Today you will find him as the executive producer of a little show called The Expanse. So welcome to you, Naren. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And then representing the modern era of Trek, oh my gosh, showrunner, producer, writer on what was CBS's way to kick off a new era of Star Trek with Star Trek Discovery. Michelle Paradise, you said that you've been with that show since the middle of the second season, and now I believe you are in the throes of filming season 5. Is that correct?
Yes, we are. Hi, and thanks for having us. Wow, I'm backwards. The video is back. Oh, that's
well, welcome, whether you are forwards or backwards. Either way, you are welcome here. Great to see you both. Really appreciate it. And like I said, there is just so much to talk about. Really, my interest is in approaches to writing within the sort of very interesting context of Star Trek, where you have a universe that is defined. So you come in as a writer full of creativity, full of ideas, but you're walking into a universe that has certain parameters on it. But then there's also the reality of TV production parameters on you. And in particular, the way I look at Star Trek from the 90s and Star Trek now, well, there's the logistical difference of multiple episodes versus, or 26 in a season versus 10 now. There's episodic filming versus serialized filming, the way that those stories are told now. I guess what I want to start out with, and what I really want to figure out here is, particularly when it comes to a show like Star Trek, do you look at your jobs as writer, producers to lead or to follow a trend? And I say that with this in mind, that when a show like Discovery came on the air, a lot of people said, well, it has to be serialized. It has to be shorter seasons because that's the way TV is done now. So is that, you're just sort of walking into what you are handed and said, okay, make the best of it, and now go tell the stories that you want to tell? Or what is most important to you? What is the approach there for either of you?
You should take that one.
okay.
I think it's more
I was
directly
waiting.
to you.
I didn't. I think, well, for Discovery, I'm not sure what those discussions were because I joined halfway through the second season. But one of the things that I'm sure was part of the discussion that I know is part of the discussion on the show is Alex Kurtzman, who's the architect of the current universe, has always said that he wants every episode to be its own movie. And when that is the case, you can't do 26 of those just because there wouldn't be the money and there wouldn't be the time to do that. So I'm not sure if that was any part of it or if it was the desire for it to be more of a streaming type show. But yeah, these episodes are very, very big. There's a lot to them, a lot of special effects and visual effects and all of those sorts of things. In terms of your earlier question about stepping into something that's sort of established and how do you navigate all of that, it feels like one of the wonderful things about Trek is that it does have this rich history of all of these shows that have come before. And so we, at least on Discovery, and I know the other shows as well, we honor the canon of that. And we recognize that we have entered into a larger universe, and we really, that's super important to us in terms of honoring those other shows, what's come before, what Gene Roddenberry himself established in creating the very first of these shows. And then we also try to blaze new ground in the show that we're doing and in the way that we do that.
Interesting that you said what I refer to on our podcast as the C word, canon, because so many fans get very worked up about canon. I'm always curious whether, Michelle, it's on the shows that you work on, Naren, on the shows that you have worked on and continue to work on. Is there a point that storytelling needs to take precedence over canon? What's the give and take there for either of you?
I guess it depends on the universe that you're working in, I suppose. I mean, I can remember back in the day on Next Generation, we felt that was a daunting universe. There have been 3 seasons of the original series. There have been, I think at that time, 6 or 7 movies, and sort of like, and that felt like an incredible amount of material. How can you come up with anything new? It is massively more than that now. But it's part of the, maintaining the logical consistency, the story consistency of the world that people have actually become accustomed to and attached to. And you try to tell stories within that without breaking things and just starting again and changing things for changing things' sake.
Yes. Sorry, I think you were holding up. Yes, exactly. It's we don't ever feel we don't ever feel limited by the canon. I mean, I feel like the canon is, as Naren said, it is the world. It's the foundation of all of the storytelling we do. On Discovery, at the end of season 2, we jump pretty far into the future. So we're no longer telling stories within the same timelines as we were in seasons 1 and 2. So to a degree, that's opened things up a little bit, but we still think very much about canon, and if we're going to, when we made the jump to the future, for example, if we want to take certain species in a different direction than they had been before, that becomes a discussion, and we discuss why that would have happened, and it is due to the time gap between where our heroes were and then where they end up in the future. But the canon itself is very, very important, and you want to be very thoughtful about that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I want to go back, bring you guys back to the earlier parts of your careers. Many of our viewers are going to be writers or filmmakers, and at different levels too. And it's always interesting for us to hear the origin stories. We heard a little bit, Naren, that you did come up as an intern and then took that next step. So if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, and then say, would that path still work today, or has the universe of filmmaking, television making changed at all?
I think it's changed quite a bit. I mean, the internship programs are, excuse me, the internship programs that are out there are great, and there's all sorts of them. I mean, the WGA has one, DGA, all of the guilds do, the studios do, ATAS does. So those are always, entry points. With with Star Trek, my path was a little odd because I came in as an intern. I had a science background. I was an engineer. And so when my internship ended, it was a 6-week internship through the Writers Guild. When that ended, Gene Roddenberry had a position of science consultant because he wanted the next generation to be a little bit more grounded in actual science than the original series. And because of my background, that allowed me to stick around. And that enabled me to pitch stories and finally get a script. And then it went from there. I don't know if that particular path is available anymore. And by the way, that was a couple of other writers who came afterwards who sort of took that science consultant path as well. Andre Bormanis, is a guy who kind of came through that direction. But it was, I don't know if that's very typical.
Well, one of the things I love hearing these stories is that there's a similar response in all of them, which is that, like, well, I'll tell you my story, but it's not going to help for everybody because it's a unique one. And that it kind of shows that there's a million different ways to come into this world. What was your story, Michelle?
Also rather unique. I had, this is kind of, I sort of came into screenwriting late because I didn't realize it was actually a job that people did. It just literally never occurred to me. So I had always been a writer and an actor, but television or film writing as a thing, just, I don't know, it just never occurred to me. So I ended up writing a short film. And at the time, there was a small network that was starting up, and they saw this short film, and they were looking to do original content. They ended up essentially taking this, and we made a series out of it, a very small series. It went 2 seasons, but that was not my break-in because I did that without representation, and that actually didn't help launch my career. So I was still, at home in my pajamas. By this point, I did realize it was a career path. So that was progress for me. And I was actually making a living as a commercial actor and trying to find a way in. And I applied to the various programs that some of which Naren was probably talking about. I was rejected from 3 of them, but I did get into the Warner Brothers program, which was pretty incredible. And so I went through the Warner Brothers program back in 2011 and came out of that. And I came out of that with my first proper staffing job on a network show and my first agent. And I've been sort of steadily working my way up since then.
Hey, I do want to remind anybody who is joining us here in the Zoom, members of the ISA, that you can drop your questions via text into the chat, and we will address those on air with our guests. So please drop those to everyone, or to me and to Scott, and we will definitely see those and get your questions answered. I do want to go back to something that just before we started the broadcast, I had mentioned to both of you that something that's very interesting to me is the changing landscape of TV. That 25 years ago, it was perfectly common and acceptable and just the normal way that things were done, that you had a series like The Next Generation that was 26 episodes a season, also a show full of special effects and complex sets and complex ideas that had to be grappled with. And now typically shows are 10 to 13 episodes and very often done far in advance, usually a season completed almost before it even goes to air. And it just seems that the writing approach, the writing style, the whole logistical nature of it is quite different in those two approaches. Naren, you almost seemed just sort of aghast that you were able to pull that off when you were working on a show with the kind of schedule that Next Gen and then later DS9 and Voyager had. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because, of course, now you're on a show that isn't. So
yeah, it was just a different era of television, and it actually did have a tremendous amount of effect on the kinds of stories that you could tell, because shows had, and by the way, this was true even when I was on CSI, and I was there until like 2011 almost. And CSI, we did 23 to 25 episodes a season. And so it was an era where you built standing sets, where you had, you committed to doing, 5 days in the studio and then 2 or 3 days out. The shooting schedules were shorter. It was much more, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it was much more of a machine. It was designed to pump out episodes very, very quickly on a very fixed, reliable, consistent schedule. And you could do things that were bigger and a little bit different, but you planned for them. They were very unusual. Most of the time, you kind of had a familiar pattern, and that was, the old pattern budget. Pattern was chosen for a very good reason. And I think that, because shows were episodic, you didn't have to worry too much about sort of tightly arcing characters. We did a little bit of that on Next Generation, more as the show, went into its later seasons. It allowed you to do it more like a rotation, right? We had a small staff, and so you could come in together, break a story. One guy would go out, write the script, you break the next one. And people would just rotate in and out, and it was very, very reliable. I don't think you can do that with a modern writer's room in a tightly arced show. It's a very, very different beast when you're telling a story that way. And I think that's part of the big reason that things are so different now.
Michelle, would you like to address that? Because I'm curious. You said that the modern Trek idea is that each episode is a movie, and then those movies are tied together, as I've read, sort of as chapters in a book. So you're thinking about a season as a whole story. Do you get to the point where you think like, oh, well, wait, but we could sort of take a little trip over into this side story or something else? Does it affect how you think about how you plot out an entire season, or do you get the luxury of taking on some of those smaller ideas within a season?
I think it's both. I've been on. I was on a show called The Originals, where the first couple of seasons we did the longer episode. It was our first season was 22, but we ended up doing 25 because we had to jump straight into the next season before we could actually take a break. And as Naren said, it's a very different beast. You're just having to run through those stories, and it is very much a machine. I think with, I should say that each of the live action versions of these new Trek shows are a bit different. Ours was built to be very serialized. That's the show that I came into. Strange New Worlds has a bit more of an episodic quality to it, although they have some serialized character arcs, but each episode is its own thing. And Picard has some of that as well. But I think we do, at least for Discovery, we do think of the season as a whole. We come in and we think about the entire season. You know, what is it that we're doing this season thematically? Who are our bad guys? What do we want for Burnham? All of those sorts of questions, and look at it as a whole. And then when we're looking at individual episodes, it is like chapters in the book of the season, if you will. But we do, within that, we'll occasionally kind of back burner the serialized element a little bit so that we could have those more standalone episodes. But generally speaking, we are pretty serialized. So even if we've got more of a standalone episode, the serialized element is still there. It's just kind of on a low simmer as opposed to in the foreground of whatever our heroes are doing.
I know that Scott has some questions from our listeners right now. I'm just curious for either of you really quickly, do you have a preference, one or the other? Naren, it sounded for a minute like you do not want to go back to the 26 episode episodic, workload. But do you have a preference, one or the other?
I actually didn't mind the workload. I actually liked it. It was intense, and it was, it's not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way. But I actually didn't mind it. But it's a different thing. I think from just being purely from the perspective of a storyteller, I find the modern version of tightly serialized shows much more fulfilling and much more satisfying, both as a writer and as an audience, because you can connect to it in a way that you couldn't really connect to the old shows. Everybody has perfectly, wonderful attachments and favorite episodes of like Next Generation, right? But it's different than attaching to the show, right? It's like you don't understand, you don't connect to the gigantic sweep of something epic. I think more like we did with The Expanse, for example. People talk about the whole idea of it. And I think that's a different way to sort of connect to material. I do prefer the latter. It's fun sometimes just to be, into one thing in a self-contained story, in and out, done. I've done anthologies before. I spent a lot of years doing those shows, and that's part of the charm of it. You sort of, you just do it and you're over and you're onto something new. You don't have that luxury in a tightly serialized show, but you also don't get to tell the kind of story that you can. And there's a reason people call it novelistic television. It is a novelistic form in the modern version.
Michelle, any feeling there on that, or preference for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel exactly the same. I really do. 22, 25 is quite a lot. I will say that I too like the larger scope, the sort of novel of it all that these shorter order serialized shows can give you. I was saying before we started that every time I go to Toronto for shooting, inevitably there's an episode of Star Trek on television. And it's usually TNG or TOS. I will say, as an audience member, I do love that when those are on, I can just turn it on and jump right into the show. There is something really wonderful about that, and it's as an audience member, it's fun, it's comforting, it's exciting. I don't know what episode I'm going to get because I'm just turning it on and there's something. So I really do enjoy that as well. But just as a writer, I think I do prefer the bit more complicated, weavy things.
Mm-hmm. So I've had the opportunity to interview quite a few writers over the years, and people that have gone from one show to the next, they always say that every writer's room is completely its own thing. It's a whole different experience, largely because it's the tone of the room, how it flows, is set by the showrunner. You've each had the opportunity to now lead writers' rooms. What do you think you bring to your rooms that make it unique, that makes it your room? We'll start with Michelle. We'll continue with you.
Well, I'm obviously very serious and very put together.
So utter chaos is the underlying theme.
No, I mean, I think for me, it's I really enjoy rooms and try and create a room that is a collaborative space, that's a safe space. The safe space piece of it is super important. Trek is we reflect things that are happening in the world, and so that creates opportunities for conversation and people to open up about things, and to be able to do that in a space where we can share things and talk with one another, and it's an okay place to do that. I feel like the best idea wins, and I think that's also very important in a writer's room. There are rooms that are run quite hierarchically. For me, I really don't care where the idea comes from. It's just if it's a great idea, it's a great idea. And we all really try and work together. We all recognize that these are harder things to break, and we can get tired. And at the end of a long haul, people get tired in the room. But we try to never lose sight of what we're doing, and that it's really, really cool that we get to go to work every day and make Star Trek. Like, it's just really cool. So for myself, I try to bring that kind of joy into it as well, and that appreciation. And it's really neat what we get to do, and also super, super organized. Because that's the other thing is, I think there's an idea maybe from the outside, as Naren was saying, when you've got 22, 25, 26 episodes or whatever, there is absolutely a machine, and you cannot fall behind. The same, by the way, is true even when you only have 10 or 13. There is still a machine. There is, by the time we start any given season, I joke that that we're already behind, but in a way we are, because the machine is out there, the production machine. You need to get things up and running. You need to get designs and all of those sorts of things. And so I think one has to be very, very organized and rigorous about trying to keep to those deadlines. But we can do that in a way that doesn't require people to work insane hours and bang their heads into their desk either.
That's great. There's that balance between the pressure of the ticking clock and also realizing that, hey, what we're doing is really fun and cool too. And that kind of hopefully keeps you healthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's neat. We're making Star Trek. Like, we all grew up watching this, whatever version of it we watched, or multiple versions or whatever. It's neat to get to be a part of that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
People are paying you to tell stories for a living. That's a pretty awesome job.
Yes, you get to go to work every day and save life.
Goodness, yeah. It sounds like Michelle and I had very similar influences, because our first boss on Next Generation, Jerry Taylor, used the old Mike Nichols dictum, "Best idea wins," and that really defined the room. And that's how, we had a very spirited bunch. The core staff on Next Gen in the last 2.5 seasons was Ron Moore, Brandon Braga, Renee Ashbury, and myself. And it's like, and all of us, it was our first job in the business. And it was, argumentative and passionate and fun. And we spent all of our time together, and we would go on vacations together. And we just and work was just a blast. But that notion of free flowing discussion where everybody gets to speak, where every idea is considered, where an idea needs to be able to withstand an argument. That's really key. If an idea can't withstand a good argument, you need a better idea. And it is probably the thing I love the most after all these years, is just being in a good room. Because when you're with the right people and the chemistry is right, there's nothing more fun. I mean, you're just kicking these ideas around, you're turning them into a story, you're turning it into something that's bigger, you're turning them into something that ideally has a piece of everybody in that room, and they can all see it. And that is a joyful experience. And then when you get to make it and put it on screen, it's fantastic.
That's wonderful. I've got so many questions I want to ask, because a writer's room is just this ant farm that fascinates me, of all the action going on in there, how everybody works together. And on that, you mentioned chemistry. And so we'll start, I do want to hear from both of you, but we'll start with Naren. What do you look for when you've got a position to fill and you're looking for one more staff writer on board? And then part of that is, what should they feel once they do come on board? I have to imagine there's a lot of pressure, maybe undue pressure. Your first day on set, you want to make a big impression, but it's not about, you don't win the game on day one.
I'm probably a bit of an outlier on this one, because years ago, I stopped doing sort of the standard staff meeting with writers, which would be like, they come into the office and you go, "Oh, I really like your script." And they go, "I really like your show." And then you chit chat for a couple of minutes, and then they walk out, and, it's half-hour meeting, and you turn to your people on your show and you go, "So should we spend like 15 hours a day with them for like the next 5 years?" It's like, it's a kind of a stupid meeting, and you don't really learn very much. So and there's no like, job test requirements, right? You just, so what I started doing was if I read somebody, I would arrange to go out after work, have a drink, sit down, and just have a conversation. Me or another one of the writers with the writer, and then just talk for a few hours just about writing, what you like about the show, what you don't like, a real conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And because part of what I was trying to assess on staff was how will this person mesh with other people? How will their voice fit in with the rest of the group? Because that in essence is what you're trying to actually staff. It's like casting a show with actors. It's like you're trying to gauge chemistry. Are people going to work well together? Is this sort of the collective, sum going to be greater? A whole going to be greater than the sum of its parts. That's really what you want. And it's a very hard thing to assess. And when you get it right, it's amazing.
Absolutely. So Michelle, for you, what's your process for bringing on a new writer?
Pretty much the same thing. I always read, and if what I see on the page speaks to me, then I'll meet with someone. I joke that I kind of don't interview people well because I don't ask the questions that are, the questions that I feel like I've been asked in the past. I really just like to talk to someone, honestly. I just like to hear who they are, because as Naren said, you are going to be spending a lot of time with these folks. And really, if someone makes it to the interview phase, that's already telling, because you've read them on the page, they can write. That they can do the job to a degree, and then it's how will they fit in the room? I also feel like it's a different process if you're building a room from scratch versus I have a slot that needs to be filled for this season. It's also a little bit different. Am I finding a senior level person who's going to run the room, or am I finding a brand new staff writer who's never been on a show before? Those sorts of things, you kind of look for different things from them, just in terms of skill set or whatever. But at the end of the day, it really is just, I don't know, is this a nice person? Is this someone who really likes writing and really wants to share ideas? How do they seem like, can I get a sense of how they might be with notes or pitching or whatever? You don't want folks who are going to be defensive, because as Naren was saying, it really can't, when it works, it's great. And it's a free flowing ideas. And can someone participate in that? Do they want to participate in that? Or do they need their idea to be the right idea? And I feel like sometimes just in talking to someone, you can get a sense of some of these things.
I agree. Very much so.
I'm going to go through some of the viewer comments that we've gotten, viewer questions, and I'll go way back to one that came in a bit earlier. Fleming, who asked, how is the advent of virtual studios impacting writing choices, if at all? Let's start with you, Michelle. Virtual
studios.
Well, I think like the volume, the
AR wall.
Yeah, AR, exactly.
Oh, it's amazing. We have an AR wall. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's
no, you do.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. I think it's incredible for not just for what you can do with something like the AR wall once you understand how to use it. It's a combo platter of you can explore worlds creatively that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, and that's also part and parcel with the cost associated. So something like an AR wall is really expensive to get up and running, but an environment that's on the wall, maybe these are huge numbers, by the way. An environment might be a couple $100,000 to put on the wall, but when you compare something like that to green screen, which is more like $100,000 a page to do green screen with actors, depending on the size and scope of the green screen environment that you're doing, there are certain environments, certain scenes, certain locations that would just be cost prohibitive if you were doing them on green screen, but you can do them on the AR wall because you pay for the asset and then you just have it there. So, it's for sure been a learning curve with us with the AR wall in terms of understanding how best to use it, what environments work well on it, where are the places we can play and where are the places to sort of stay away from, what's the thing that's going to make the environment skyrocket in terms of expense. So all of those things, but I think it really is an incredible tool. Not every show has the budget to be able to do something like that because the investment portion is hugely expensive. But for us, it's been a lot of fun to get to have that at our disposal.
And Naren, how about you?
I think it has pluses and minuses. I think certain shows really, it's fantastically matched for it. I think there's a tendency to think it's going to solve every single problem, and there are cases in which it's not necessarily the best solution. Yeah, I mean, you use everything to make a show.
Sure.
It's an incredible bit of kit. And again, if you have the right kind of show to leverage it week after week after week, it absolutely is indispensable.
Great. Now, to add on to the writers' room conversations, Fleming also asked if is everything back in person if you're on a writing staff, or is there still kind of a Zoom writers' room world at all?
Go ahead.
Please. Oh, you go.
I am finding, and just based on conversations with friends, very few writers' rooms are in person right now still. I think people are, still a little bit leery of it. I think that if I were starting a new show right now, today, I'd probably say, hey, let's all get together and be together for, a couple months, 10 weeks. And then people can kind of move off and do what they need to do. The flexibility for a lot of people is tremendously valuable. And so many productions are now done remotely anyways. You end up having that interface no matter what you're doing. I will say this, it's way more fun to be in a writer's room in person. I mean, we had a bar cart in our writer's room that got a lot of use. And let me tell you, it was always a nice way to end the day. And it always led to good conversations and interesting ideas, just as people kind of like kick back and relaxed. Very old school in that regard.
Naren, it sounds like you should come down to the Roddenberry office sometime. I got a shelf to show you.
I'm pretty sure every single writer on Star Trek had a bottle of something in their desk. It was that kind of cliche. So that's yeah.
Has that lengthened the prep time to get a script ready? Because maybe you're not jiving.
People are drunk. No.
Not in so many words.
No, that's no.
No, not that. The virtual, the Zoom room.
Oh, the Zoom room. The Zoom room. I don't know. I mean, Michelle, you answer that. I worked with the guys on the Expanse for a long time. We did our 6th season entirely remotely, but everybody had worked together for such a long period of time. It didn't really make much of a difference.
Okay, great.
I just want to go on Naren's next show because I want to have a room with a bar cart in the corner and afternoon conversations. We did all of season 4 remotely, of course, because that was the height of the pandemic. We were able to do some of our mini room this season in person, and we made a valiant effort to be in person a couple days per week at the start of the season. But then Omicron hit, and it just never mind. Even being in person. It wasn't quite the same because we were maintaining distancing, and so we had a huge room and we were masked and trying to keep a distance from one another even with the masks. And so even being in person, it didn't feel the same as when you're able to be in a room in just kind of a normal environment. But in terms of has it lengthened the time for the process? I don't think so. We're still, pretty rigorous about our schedule, but like Naren said, I do miss being in person. There's something about the energy of that and looking across a table and hearing those ideas and building that I've been pleasantly surprised by Zoom and what we can accomplish on Zoom and the way we can find that kind of alchemy on Zoom, despite the fact that it's just a bunch of boxes on a screen. So it works well enough, and as Naren also said, it allows people to participate for whom the travel might be a challenge, or it makes it so that people aren't driving an hour each way every day in Los Angeles traffic. So there are definitely some upsides to that.
I will say this. I actually quite detest Zoom, because the problem is you never know where to look. Like I'm sure I'm looking like all around right now, and it becomes a very fatiguing mode of interaction. So I actually moved all of our stuff to Discord. We just use audio.
Oh, sure,
and it actually became a much better interaction, because people could talk freely, talk over each other. You weren't constantly having these sort of like weird mixed signals that kind of throw your body language and your brain off a little bit. It's like and Discord became actually the preferred mode of interaction. Occasionally use video for some things, but very rarely. And I actually really quite like it.
Well, don't worry, but we've had you on mute most of the time, so
don't worry about it.
Perfect.
You're good. Perfect. I'm better on mute. I really am.
We have a question here from Curtis, who's watching the broadcast. Says, "What's the smallest/biggest writers' room that you've worked in?" Meaning the number of people in that room. And do you think that there's an ideal size, or maybe that depends on the type of show? So, Michelle, let's start with you.
Smallest writer's room was the show that I referenced that came from the short that I had written, and it was me and the showrunner Bill. There were two of us.
Oh, wow!
And we would go every day to the back room at Denny's, and we would sit at the back room at Denny's. I had so many grilled cheese sandwiches back there. And we wrote both seasons of the show from various back rooms at Denny's, just the two of us.
Nice. See, just imagine what kind of show you could come up with if you switched over to like the Moon Over Miami off the Denny's menu. Could have been a totally different show.
It would have been a whole different show. Yeah, would have been amazing. Probably the largest room, I don't know, it might have been, we had a pretty big room in season 2 when I came into Discovery. I want to say there were like maybe 13 or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but I believe that was the biggest room. And then to just answer the question, what is the ideal number? For me, I think it really depends on the show. It depends on how many episodes you're doing. Is it episodic or is it serialized? Is it half hour or an hour? How long are you planning to spend breaking these episodes? Those sorts of things. So I think it just depends. I don't know that there's necessarily a right answer. It's also, how does the showrunner like to work? Because there are some shows where you come and discuss stuff and then everyone goes away. There are some rooms that are in it all together all day, every day. So
it also depends on how you define the room. I mean, it's like you'll have like, different people who may be, in charge of the show, but they're non-writing, or they're kind of writers, or, so, Next Generation, we had essentially like a core staff of 4. Jerry Taylor was our direct boss, and, we would break the stories, and then Michael Pillar would come in and look at them. Right. And he'd give us notes, and then we would change stuff. That was how Next Gen worked. On CSI, I think one year we were around that 13, 15 writers, which is, I think, incredibly unwieldy. I don't think it really works even in a show when you're doing that many episodes. It's hard to get focus out of that many people. And what happens, in that situation, you often break into 2 different story rooms. And then you're just then it's just a volume game, right? You're just trying to pump out the number of stories for your show to fill the allotment. So I like it when it's a little smaller. You get, I think, more focused conversations if you have the right people. Half dozen is more than that. It gets a little bit unwieldy for my taste.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to take this one from Lisa. Just ask her. This is a great one. Do you guys get many notes from the network, and how much room do you have to ignore or implement them? And I want to add a little bit extra to that, meaning in the sense of, has that changed also through the years from Next Generation to today? Whoever wants to take it.
Why don't you start?
Well, let's see. I think it depends. We have studio partners, network partners, and Secret Hideout, which is Alex's company. So we do get notes, but I think how many notes is sort of a dependent on the episode itself, and what and also what stage we're at. So just in terms of process, we have what's called a story area, which is a 4 to 5 page document that tells them here's what the story is going to be. Then we have an outline, and then we have the script itself. So typically we'll get notes on a story area and a script. So it really just depends, I guess, on where we are. In terms of do we have to take them? For me personally, I feel like any note that's coming, there's a reason for that note. And I think that taking notes and rewriting things always ends up making whatever it is better. So yes, we hear all of those notes and then we work to implement those. Are there some we may or may not be able to implement if there's a suggestion for, can you do something and can you do it this way specifically? Maybe we can do that, maybe we can't, maybe it's right for the story or not. But really the benefit, I think, of the notes process is that you have someone with a fresh brain who's coming into your story cold. They're able to look at it in whatever form they're reading it. And you may think I've been super clear on this story point or beat or whatever it is, and there may be just it's not clear. And so I don't know. I find that process to be pretty helpful, and I feel like it always gets better once we've taken another crack at it, whatever that is.
Michelle is much nicer than me. I would agree with the fact that you can always get good notes anywhere and anywhere in the process. There are great executives, studios, networks who give you really insightful criticism of material, and taking it and listening to it and being open to it is always a way to make things better. Conversely, you can also get lots of stupid and really dumb notes as well. And then it's your responsibility to say no, because you can always say no to a note. At the end of the day, they hired you to write it. And I guess for me, where I sort of get my backup most of the time is when I feel notes are coming from a place where they don't like how you've chosen to tell the story. And that's sort of not their job. It's like our job as writers, as showrunners, when you're crafting a narrative, you are choosing a way to tell a story. Any number of people would tell it in any number of different ways. But when you try to impose that on it, that's where you clash a lot of times. And I push back pretty hard against that, because I don't think that's their job. And I don't think it should be their job. And I think especially young writers, they come up, you have to be respectful and you have to listen, all right? Because you will always learn things, but you will get into danger if you try to please everybody at every phase of the process all the time, because that's writing a story by committee, and that will never work. It will just turn to something really shitty. And I think that it is important to understand that when you're writing something, when you've been hired to write something, you are being hired to put forth the vision of a story. So embrace that job, right? That's what we're supposed to do.
So oh, go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
Oh, all I was going to say is yes to all of that. And I was just going to say it took a while for me as well to learn that process. I look back on some of my earlier scripts, and I would get notes, and I would try and address all the notes in the ways that they were handed to me. And then the end result would be a script that just was a hodgepodge of so many different things. And I think it is 100% a learned skill to know. What we talk about a lot is what's the note behind the note. So yeah. There's the note you're given, and then there's the why of it. And the note may not be, it may want to take you in a different direction, but if you really look at the note behind the note, it's a clarity issue. It's a, whatever it may be. But yes to what he said.
And it's real art, actually, when you find great executives who can talk to writers. We had a terrific, the head of Alcon Television, Sharon Hall. She was a head of drama at Sony for many, many years. She was great talking to writers. She would not get too micro. She'd be specific. She would say, here's what I'm having trouble with. And she would never offer like 5 bad solutions. She'd just say, here's what I'm having problems with. Think about that. How do you feel about that? And that's a great way to work with writers. You will often get 5 terrible solutions. And it's like, I don't mind people identifying problems, but it's like, let the gang figure out the solutions, or at least give us a shot to make something work before you go down that road.
So I want to take this question of notes and feedback into a slightly different direction. Okay, so we know that we have TV viewers, we know that we have Star Trek fans, and then we know that we have Star Trek fans who are vocal and opinionated. So, as two people who have been on the inside of Star Trek production, seeing and hearing and getting all the feedback that comes from Star Trek fans who are heavily invested in what they see on TV, how do you take it and what do you do with it? And I'm thinking about this especially because we are talking about two different eras. You've got the next gen Voyager DS9 model where you're in the middle of production. A show may have as short a turnaround time as, well, we shot it and 3 or 4 weeks later it's on the air, versus now where you're shooting something that may not air for another year and the entire season is done by the time an audience actually gets to see it. So that is a big can of worms to open up. Therefore, I will distance myself from your answers. Go ahead, Naren, let's start with you.
Yeah, let's start in the past. I mean, Next Generation, you're talking about a show that existed essentially pre-mainstream internet. You know, we had fans who would review the show, but they were like on a Usenet group, right? It was all about something. And it would be, there was one guy, I forget his name, but he would write the most nastiest reviews of every single episode. And every week we would read them over, like whenever they came out. And it'd be like, wow, you hated it so much, you wrote 15 pages of how shitty the episode was.
Naren, just as a correction, I think that was Gene Roddenberry's lawyer.
It was hilarious. But, you know, it was a very different relationship with fandom. You'd see it at, like, if you went to some of the conventions and things like that. But that was also after it had aired for the entire season. It was just, you didn't have the direct kind of feedback loop. So you were actually separated from it with a reasonable amount of time. That's the world has changed so dramatically since then.
And Michelle?
I don't know. It's weird because we don't quite have that direct feedback loop either, because it takes so long in post to be able to get the show ready to air. So as you said, you know, we shot something last year that's airing this year or whatever have you, but yeah, so we're not, you know, it's not like we're still making the show while people are responding to the show. But yeah, folks can be very, very vocal. And you know, I personally, I love that people are so passionate about it. We're also passionate about it. You know, I don't love that some of that is hateful and mean, and that it targets people on our show. In front of the camera or behind the scenes. I don't think there's any place for that in any fandom. And it's just inexcusable. If someone doesn't like the writing or the show or the episode or the stories, totally fine. But, you know, there's a way to put that out there in the world, or not, in a way that's respectful of the fact that these are other human beings working very hard who are passionate about what they do. And, you know, whether one likes any show on the air or not, everyone who's making a show has set out to make something good. No one goes into a writer's room thinking, you know, on any show, I want to make something really shitty. Like, I really want to wet the bed on this. You know, there are so many different reasons that a show, that one may respond to a show or not, or that a show may be perceived as being good or not. And, you know, but we just we try to all of us filter out the negative side of things, and just honor that any kind of universe like Trek is going to have people who are very, very passionate, and we really appreciate that, and especially when people can be kind about it, whether or not they respond to the material.
Yeah, that's great. And, keeping it positive, the ISA, we love to support and encourage writers at any level, every level, to take that next step. And we want to be there for them on their journey. So I wanted to ask you, and you can take it any way you want, whether it's you see trends shifting a certain way. So here's a little bit of advanced knowledge from the trenches of what a writer could do, or a note of inspiration, a tip, anything that you guys want to say that could help maybe a writer that's trying to just take the next step in their journey.
Oh man, it's going to sound like the worst platitude ever. Just, keep writing. I mean, it's just practice. It's like it sounds trite maybe, but that was one of the great things about like the original Trek. You did so many episodes, you got so much experience working in a room and breaking stories. And that's something you could take to other shows. And it was discipline and just practice. You hone, there's part of this that is a craft, and structuring a story. There's a lot of craft in it. It's not entirely that, but that's what you got to do when you're on the outside looking in a bit. You just got to keep writing. You got to rewrite. You got to look back at your own material, step back, assess it like it's somebody else's work, and then go back in and try to fix it. You will learn more doing that if you're honest with yourself than just about anything else in the process, I think.
And just to add to that, solicit feedback from other people. Solicit feedback from people who will be honest. Like the worst thing that you can do is hand your script to someone and then they just give you a bunch of glowing reviews and then you have learned nothing. Give it to people who will look at it and say, your character doesn't have an arc, or there's not a turn in the scene here, or this dialogue sounds clunky, or whatever it is. We've all gotten those notes 100%. And you get those notes and then you learn from those notes, as Naren was saying, and then you get better. So yeah, it sounds like a platitude, but keep writing. And then also just know that if you want to be a writer, there's a reason you want to be a writer. It's because you have something to say. You have things inside you that you need to get out. And, the world needs to hear those things. So keep writing and write the things that come from inside you, and keep at it. It's not, as I think has been clear just from our two histories getting into this business, but ask any writer, and as you said, they're going to have a different journey. There's no one way in, and there's no one time frame by which it's going to happen. It took me 10 years to, before I got my first staff job. And I know people who have come out of college and boom, there they are, and they're in a writer's room, and good for them. But it might just, there's no one path, so just keep at it.
Absolutely. And there's one really quick thing in here I just wanted to address. Somebody said, well, how do you get feedback without somebody stealing your idea? Well, first off, get your work protected. WGA, Library of Congress, whatever you can do. But also know that if it's your story, nobody's going to have the same passion that you will to tell it. So even if somebody takes concepts from it, nobody's going to tell your story the way you will. So really, I don't worry too much about that. Yes, get it protected. But beyond that, I think there's a lot more worry than necessary when it comes to stealing ideas. So
Well
to John.
Hey, look, this hour has gone by entirely too quickly. I could absolutely keep talking about this all day. I want to sincerely thank our very special guest, Naren Shankar, Michelle Paradise. As a Trek fan, Trek follower, this has been a fabulous peek behind the scenes from two very different production styles with two fabulously talented people. So thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with the followers and members of the ISA. Scott, Molly, before us, thank you. I know that Roddenberry is very proud to have been associated with the ISA for this production, and look forward to doing it again sometime. So cheers to everybody who joined us. And looks like Molly is back. So, but with that, thank you. Unless Molly, do you have a parting shot here? No? Okay.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody who logged in and checked out the show today. And we definitely look forward to the next one.